All right, let's dive into something that's been making headlines. Assisted dying legislation in the UK. England and Wales are considering a bill to legalize it for terminally ill adults.
And Scotland has its own separate bill. It's really interesting.
It is. You've given me a ton of sources for this deep dive. A BBC article about the proposed law, some arguments for and against it, and even how assisted dying works around the world.
Yeah, it's been getting a lot of attention, especially in the last few months, right? Like how we approach end of life choices,
Oh, definitely. So let's start with England and Wales. The terminally ill adults end-of-life bill.
Mhm.
Um, there are some pretty strict rules about who can even ask for assisted dying.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
You have to be over 18, have lived in England or Wales for at least a year, and you have to be terminally ill. Like doctors think you have less than 6 months to live, and even then there's more.
More. Like what?
Safeguards, like they want to make sure people really understand what they're choosing. You need two different doctors to agree that you qualify. And they have to make sure you're not being pressured, that it's really what you want.
Makes sense.
And there are waiting periods. So after those two doctors, you have to wait 7 days. And then if they approve it, you have to wait another 14 days before you can actually get the medication.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. Are those waiting periods to address the worries people have about, like, coercion? People being pressured into it?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. To give people time to think, make sure it's their own decision. There was even an idea to have a high court judge approve every request.
A judge. Wow.
Yeah, but that's, well, a lot of cases for the courts.
Yeah, I can see that. So what's the process now?
The bill now says there should be a panel of experts, like legal and medical people, chosen by a new commission, the Voluntary Assisted Dying Commission. Another layer of checks, I guess.
So many steps. It's like they're trying to be really careful. Where does the bill stand right now, like in the process of becoming law?
Well, it's being looked at really closely by a group of MPs.
Oh, like a committee?
Yeah, committee scrutiny, it's called. They go through it line by line, debate it. They might even change some things. Then it goes back to the House of Commons for a vote, then the House of Lords. And even if it passes all that, it'll probably take 2 years to actually, go into effect.
A lot of hurdles. I was reading that in November 2024, MPs actually voted on an earlier version of this bill.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it passed 380 votes to 275. It was a free vote, too.
Right, a free vote. So they could vote how they personally felt, not just follow their party line.
Exactly. Shows how this issue, it's not so simple, right? Not just one side versus the other.
Definitely no.
Okay, well, let's talk about Scotland for a minute. They have their own bill going, right? The Assisted Dying Scotland bill.
They do. It's similar, focuses on terminally ill adults, same kind of requirements, but it's earlier in the process. The health committee is looking at it now.
I read there's some debate about whether the Scottish Parliament can even make this law.
Yeah, the Scottish Health Secretary has said it's not actually within Holyrood's powers. The person who wrote the bill obviously disagrees.
Huh. So they have to figure that out before it can even go to a vote.
Exactly. It's an interesting situation. You have these different parts of government. They might not agree.
Adds another layer to all of this. Okay, well, regardless of all that, let's get into the heart of the matter. What are the big arguments for and against assisted dying, like from the sources you gave me?
Well, people who want to change the law, they talk a lot about individual freedom. If someone is terminally ill, suffering, they should have the right to choose how and when they die. They argue even with the best palliative care, there's still pain that can't be taken away.
Dignity in dying, they have those statistics, right? They say maybe 650 terminally ill people end their own lives every year in the UK. On their own, basically.
It's a tough reality. And then, on the other side, the people against assisted dying, they worry about vulnerable people. What if they're pressured? Even if it's not intentional, maybe they feel like a burden. And some question how accurate those 6-month prognoses are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they say we should focus on making palliative care better for everyone, not on making assisted dying legal.
I noticed some of the strongest voices against this are people with disabilities, like Baroness Gray Thompson, the Paralympian, and Liz Carr, the disability rights activist.
Their perspective is so important to this debate. They say, what kind of message does this send? If we legalize assisted dying, does it say that life with a disability isn't as valuable, even if that's not what we mean? Could it feel that way?
So many angles to this. Individual choice, the possibility of coercion, the limits of palliative care, how this affects how we see disability.
It's a lot to think about. It's a complicated ethical issue. There are good points on both sides. What you think so far going through all this? What stands out to you? It really makes you think about how we handle death and dying. It's interesting to look at how other countries are doing this. Assisted dying laws are all over the place.
Reading through these sources, I realized I'm not even sure I know the difference between like assisted dying, assisted suicide, and euthanasia. It all kind of gets lumped together.
Yeah, the words can be confusing. Assisted dying is the general term, but it usually means a doctor gives a terminally ill person medication and they take it themselves. Assisted suicide is broader. It's anything that helps someone end their life, even if they're not dying. Could be giving them pills, could even be helping them travel to a place where it's legal. Then euthanasia, that's when the doctor actually gives the lethal injection.
Ah, okay. I get it now. So where is all this actually legal?
Well, Switzerland is kind of the pioneer, I guess. They've allowed assisted suicide since 1942. They even have this clinic, Dignitas, that people travel to.
I've heard of that. People come from the UK, right?
Yeah, a lot of people. Shows you how important this is to some people. They'll travel across the world to have this choice. And it's not just Switzerland. In the US, 11 states and DC allow physician-assisted dying. Basically, doctors can prescribe lethal medication for terminally ill patients.
Wow. So it's becoming more common.
Seems like it. Some countries have gone even further. Canada, they legalized euthanasia back in 2016. They call it medical assistance in dying. And get this, in 2023, almost 5% of all deaths in Canada were from this.
5%. That's a lot. I wonder if it changes how people think about dying when it's an option.
Interesting question. Australia is a mixed bag, actually. Different states have different laws. It's a bit of a mess. And New Zealand just legalized assisted dying for terminally ill people recently. Just for their last few months, though.
It's all so different. Like each country is trying to figure this out their own way.
Yeah, and here's something that might surprise you. The Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, they don't even require you to be terminally ill. Yeah, they've broadened it to unbearable suffering, even if you're not going to die right away.
So it's not just about the physical illness, it's about how much you're suffering.
Exactly. Makes you think, how do you measure suffering? Who gets to decide when it's too much? And what about doctors? What's their role in all of this? As more countries do this, I think we'll see even more different laws.
So interesting. It's a global thing, right? Not just happening in the UK. It really puts things in perspective. It feels like we're at a turning point, in how we think about death. Not just in the UK, but everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. It's making us ask some really basic questions like, what does it mean to die well? How much can we control that? And how do we take care of people who are hurting, not just physically, emotionally, too?
And do we have the right to make these choices, even if it affects everyone else? It's heavy stuff. And as medicine gets better, as we change how we think about things, it's only going to get more complicated.
For sure. Looking ahead, I think these laws, they could change everything. How we as a society see death and end-of-life care. Like, will we be more open to talking about it, planning for it? Will it mean more support for people who don't want assisted dying? That's something we'll all have to figure out together.
So much to think about. Wow, we've covered a lot today. Those two bills here in the UK, people on both sides, and all those different laws around the world. There's no easy answer, is there?
Nope. Not at all. But that's what makes it so interesting. We have to really think about what we believe, listen to other people, and talk about it.
And that's what this deep dive is all about, right? Giving us the information so we can form our own opinions. It's been really eye-opening for me.
Me too. It's been great talking about this with you. I hope it gets people thinking, doing their own research.
Yeah, keep learning about it, asking questions, keep the conversation going.